All right. Oh, there we are. Hey, we figured it out. Sorry, it's really my fault. I forgot to put the headset on after the baptism. They frown on us taking those into the baptistry. Anyway, the legend of the marathon, the race, is that in 490 BC, the Persians were attacking Greece. And the Athenians allowed the advance to happen, and it appeared that the Persians were breaking through their ranks, when in reality the Athenians are just kind of spreading out, letting them come in, and then they can attack them on both sides. And so the Persians at some point realized, even though they had the much greater force, realized that they were defeated and couldn't actually overcome the Athenians. And so they fled back to their ships, and that's the rest of that story. But there's an Athenian man who was chosen, named Phidippides. They chose him to run from Marathon to Athens. And this is a journey of about 25 miles, depending on the exact route. Kind of goes around a mountain one way or another. And so he made it to Athens, and he brought news of the victory. He comes in, he's shouting, Nike! Nike is victory. We get our word for our modern shoe company, Nike. We mispronounce it for that one, but in Greek it's Nike. And so he's shouting, victory, we've conquered. And upon delivering the news, he collapses and dies. Now, for the non-runners in the room, that's all the proof you need to see the dangers of running. But this isn't the end of the story, really. The same man had actually just run about 150 miles. He had gone all the way from Athens to Sparta before the Persians had arrived. They saw the ships coming. They sent him as a runner. He made it there in a couple of days, asking them to send troops. The Spartans were known for their warrior culture. And so they ask him to send troops, and then he comes back and fights the battle, and then he runs a marathon, and then he dies. Okay, so there's a lot more exertion than just one little tiny marathon. But he was part of a kind of class of runners, guys who would bring news from one part of the kingdom to another. Because there's not a united kingdom, right? Just a bunch of city-states. And so these guys were kind of the first ultra runners, for lack of a better term. So he'd probably done, 300 miles or so in the space of a couple of weeks. It's important when we hear this story that we understand the Greek in the New Testament. It's not unique. It's not special language that, Paul and Luke and Matthew invented. So this guy who's running and carrying this message, that message in Greek, it translates to English as the good news or the gospel. That's actually the direct translation of the word. So in his job, he was known as an evangelist. And so he was one who was sent to herald the good news. And so in the New Testament, we borrow these terms and they take on a Christian meaning. But in their Greek culture, it's just a guy who's charged of like, hey, bring word back and tell them of our victory. He's the evangelist sent to bring the good news. This man gave his life to be a runner and to carry the news from the battlefield. And that's the question for us as we think about today's final sermon in the series is what has God called us to spend our life, to give our life doing? Now, I have a special interview happening this morning. We're doing it by extension. I recorded this call last week. And so if you've heard me tell any stories from the jungle, probably it is this partner right here that I went down to see. And so his story is really interesting. I'll let him tell that. But basically, it starts with him having worked a full career and then in retirement, starting a new mission project. So we'll watch that video for a little bit and then I'll come up and give some closing remarks.
Nicholson, and executive director. I was executive director of the Kokama Project, which is a nonprofit ministry that we put together to work with indigenous tribal people down in the Amazon. And I say I was because just recently we have a young couple that have kind of taken over down there as my wife and I are getting on up there in age, and it's time to start doing some handoffs on some things. So anyhow, we've been at it for quite a few years.
So this started as a kind of retirement project for you. Tell us a little bit about what was your day job before Kokama Project was a thing.
Okay, yeah, I graduated as an electrical engineer, BSEE, in let's see, when did I graduate? 77, late 77. And all these years I've worked as an electrical engineer, engineering, both construction and engineering. I've been, you know, petrochemical, pulp and paper, you name it, just about I've done it. But anyhow, yeah, 30 something, almost 35 years of engineering and construction experience, registered and licensed engineer in several states. And that was what I did for a living for many, many years.
So where Kokama Project is located is way off the beaten path. How did you go? So. How did you go from being an engineer in the Houston area to even being aware of this area, much less starting a project down there?
My wife and I, Marcy and I, have always supported missions financially. And supported them heavily. We really believe in missions, but we never felt like we were called to go. We were the senders. We were an engineer. She's a school teacher, and we made good money, and so we felt like we were senders. That was our calling as far as missions go. And there are, I mean, you need senders, so we were, but. Later in life, like I said, I think I was 62, if I remember correctly. And we had an opportunity to go down to Peru and to meet, to do some work down there with a mission team from our church. So Marcy and I talked about it and prayed about it. And yeah, we both felt led to go down there and be a part of this mission trip. We'd never been on a mission trip before. So we went. Before we got there, the young man that was really hosting us was a missionary that lives in Iquitos, Peru. And he had asked, we were supposed to go to a little village called Nauta, which is about 60 miles down from Iquitos, where you fly in and through the jungle. And we were supposed to go down there and do some teaching, kind of some, VBS, Vacation Bible School type stuff and things like that. And before we went, he contacted us and said, "Hey, I've got a village out in the jungle, and I'm not sure. There's supposed to be a pastor out there, but he may have passed away. I think he had a heart attack or something. And I would like to go check on him. Is there any in your group?" We had a group of 10 going. "Is there any in your group that would be willing to go out and live in a tribal village for a few days while we check on them and see how they're doing?" And of course, Marcy and I said, "Yeah, we'll go." And we did. We ended up in a village, the name of which is Nueve de Octubre, which is the 9th of October. They named the village after the day the government, Peru, recognized them as an official village. And we were there for 4 or 5 days. I can't remember now, but we just fell in love with the people. We got home, and about, I don't know, 4 or 5 days later, maybe a week, we were both sitting around in the back patio. And I don't know who said it first, but one of us looked at the other one and said, "We belong in a jungle, don't we?" And the other one said, "Yeah, I was thinking the same thing." So that was it. God called us. And we felt reassured because he didn't just call one of us, he called us both. So
it's handy when it works that way.
Yeah. So we started putting everything together to get fully retired. And so we did. It took us about a year, really, to get it all taken care of. And then we moved down there and started living in the jungle.
So you're 62, you're retired, you're going out to the jungle, having been, living in a city for a long time and probably never having lived in the jungle before. I mean, you kind of have some experience in South Louisiana with some water and boat culture, that's for sure. The swamps, yeah, you know all about swamps and the gators and snakes and spiders and all the other good creepy crawlies that you get in the jungle environment. What would it have looked like kind of in month one or year one when you were first living out there?
Well, like I told you earlier, my wife Marcy was a school teacher for many years, and I always felt like she had a skill or something that could be used for missionary service, But I'm an engineer. Who needs an engineer in the jungle, And sure enough, we got down there, and we were sitting there, and before we went, I prayed. I said, Lord, please, I'll go to the jungle. I don't mind doing that, but don't let me come home and not know why I was there. Just give us an idea of what we were doing or why we were there. And sure enough, we were sitting there about the second day we were there, and people walking down to the river with a bucket, and they would wade out into the water and get a bucket of water and then carry it back up the hill. And the young missionary that I was sitting with, we were just staring at the river and talking about different things. And he said, these people need a boat dock. And the light went on, and I thought, okay, there's something I might be able to do. Well, it took us almost a year to get the logistics straightened out where we could get the materials we needed into the jungle to build a boat dock. But we did. And during that time, we made friends with with the people out there and the people in the village. And they were afraid of us at first. They have, there's a lot of mysterious things in the jungle, and they have their traditions and they have their beliefs, and they're afraid of things. It's a power fear society. Mm-hmm. And they're really afraid of a lot of things, and they were afraid of us. They had grown up being told and believing that gringos, which we lovingly accepted being called gringos, we had no problem with that at all. But gringos were face peelers, they called them. They would come at night and cut your face off and steal it. So we kind of had an uphill battle to gain their respect and their love. And, eventually we did. But building the boat docks got men involved where they weren't involved before. And so I made some friends with some men in the village that otherwise would not have been possible if we had not been doing something that, they would be interested in. And as far as the first couple of years goes, it was difficult. We had some of them still didn't trust us. They didn't believe us. And I'll never forget, after about a year, maybe a year and a half, we were going to try to help with some CPR type, some health things like CPR, how to do some things that might help them, and have somebody come from the United States and teach certain things like that. And so we thought, well, let's not just do it for our village. Let's get some of these surrounding villages. And I'll never forget going to a nearby village. And we went in and docked the boat and walked up the hill, and we met with the village leaders. Well, the village leader was a lady. And besides her being the chief or whatever you would call that in that village, she had several, 4 or 5 different people that kind of sat behind her. They all sat, and she just sat there, with her arms crossed, and she stared at me, and they never said a word. They just looked at me, and so I got up and gave them about a 15-minute spiel on what we were doing. And I always try to start off and say, well, you're probably wondering who we are. Well, we're Christians, and our God told us to love our neighbor, love God and love our neighbor, and we consider you to be our neighbor. So we didn't come here to hurt you or do anything wrong. We just came to love you. And then I would tell them what we wanted to do, and that was to have them join us for some training sessions at our village. Well, I got finished 15, 20-minute talk about all of that. And I kind of, and I stopped and I said, well, do you have any questions? This lady just kind of stared at me with her arms crossed, and she was the chief of the village and everything. And she said, I know who you are. And I thought, oh, man.
Oh, boy.
She thinks I'm a face healer. I'm going to have to run for the boat. And she said, I know who you are. And I just kind of grimaced a little bit. She said, you're the ones they've been calling the white Kokama. And I tell you what, it was all I could do to keep from crying. I almost teared up, because what that meant, the Kokamas is the name of the tribe that we were living with. And when she said that, it meant, hey, word's gotten out that we're here and we've been accepted. And our own tribe has been telling other tribes or other villages that we were not gringos, we were white Kokamas. And it was probably one of the most influential things for me Because it kind of eliminated a lot of concerns and fears that I had. If they were talking like that about us, then we'd made progress. We weren't face peelers anymore, and
Yeah.
it's good not to be a face peeler in the middle
Yeah,
of it.
right.
So,
At some point, you went from engineering-based projects and thinking, but then at some point, sort of the mission strategy shifted. Tell us about kind of the pastor training and how did that sort of take place?
yeah, well, it didn't take long. One of the best friends that I made right away was a little Kokama man. His name was Jorge. We would go to his church services and they would sing and sing and sing, and then all of a sudden they would stop and he would read maybe one or two verses out of something and talk about it for no more than 2 or 3 minutes, and then they would go back and sing. That's singing was what they did. That was their way they worshiped, but they weren't learning anything. And there was a lot of questions that would come up, and they would ask me, and I would, they were just off base on a lot of things because they had no education, had nobody to teach them. And so it wasn't long till Marcy and I both said, "Look, we got to do something. We got to get some teaching in here. They really need it." And so we started by just having, actually our youngest son is a pastor, and I talked him into going down the first time. And we did, and did the teaching. And then I had another church nearby that saw what we were doing and heard about it. They said, "Well, we'd like to go do it." So they came, and man, after the first couple of times, I mean, the place just exploded because what happened was the word got out that there was somebody there that could teach them about the Bible, and there was people from so far away. Everything there is traveled by boat or walk through the jungle. Most of it's boat, and there's no roads. And we had people that take 3 days by boat to get to our place and spend 4 or 5 days just learning whatever we had to teach at the time. And it was very simple stuff. So they were thrilled that somebody would come there and teach them. Good Sunday school teacher did great down there. You didn't have to have a PhD or anything. You just needed to be able to communicate and teach basic stuff out of the Bible. We had 70 people in there. We were feeding them for a week. It was a big deal, and it was very inexpensive considering how much good was coming out of it. And so that's how we got started, and then it just mushroomed. It just, God just, my goodness, we had no idea from building boat docks. Just, God, don't let me come home without knowing what we're doing or why I was down there. Next thing you know, we over 10, 11 years, I don't remember how many years even, that we lived down there in the jungle and did these things. So
yeah.
In the meantime, my engineering skills came in, and we were able to get water and things that were really difficult for them, but we were able to really put together a pretty nice place for visitors to come in from the United States and teach.
So you retire, you get this idea that you're going to go down and live in the jungle. And I know a lot of retirees, one of the things that a couple things they get worried about. Number one is just, will I have enough money to last? Another one is, what about my health? And here you are going down to a place where you're going to be pouring in both time, energy, health, money, your own and others. Also, you're remote. I mean, I've been out there. There's no quick emergency services coming to get you if you get sick down there. How did you manage all of that in your mind? I mean, what do you do with those fears about health and security and all of that kind of stuff to go down and live in the jungle at this time in your life?
That's a hard question. I really don't know how to explain it clearly. I know what I feel. Like I said, we were going down on a trip, one-time trip. God called us to go in and live there. And when we realized what was going on in our lives with our relationships, my wife and I, with our relationship with God, we just said, okay, let's do it. And we give up anything. We don't care. Let's go. And it was that total submission that really drove it. And I'm not please understand that's not a bragging point, because I think we all have problems sometimes submitting to what God's will is. But in this case, it was so clear for Marcy and I both, and we just said whatever it takes. And I'll tell you, as far as money and things like that, I was an engineer. I had worked with a lot of people, and they said, "Have you lost your mind?" Some of them did. Have you lost your mind? Your kids are grown. Your house is paid for. You can work another 10 or 15 years and sock away a lot of money. And I said, "Well, what am I going to do with it?" I would rather go down and work with these people. And I'll tell you what, it's been the greatest project as an engineer or otherwise. This has been the greatest project I've ever had in all of my career, all of my life. Loving these people and having them love us back and decide that we weren't face peelers. Within the last couple of years, we had one of our tribal people from it was not Kokami, it was Matses, and they live over very near Brazil. And he had come a few times, but two or three times. He came and he was there, and we had gotten to know him really well. And first of all, he had asked me to come to their village. And I had a lot of people who really were forcefully saying, "Don't go. They're dangerous people. They're a dangerous tribe. Something can happen to you." But I went anyhow. I had one translator, a guy that works with us all the time. And it was wonderful. I mean, we got there and we were able to preach and do some things. And anyhow, a little bit later, he came to our pastor training and he said, "I'd like to talk to you. I would like to see if you can help me." And what was it? And he said, "Well, I would like some money for gasoline. I want to go into Brazil." They're very close to the Brazilian border. And he said, "I want to go into Brazil and do some mission work of my own." He said, "I feel like I've learned." What we usually do is teach stories. We teach Bible stories because a lot of them are they're verbal, oral storytelling. And he said, "I've learned enough. I think I can go reach some people in Brazil." And I said, "Boy, that sounds like fun. I'd like to go with you." And he said, "Oh, you can't go." When it was translating from Matses to Spanish to English and then back around the horn, And I said, "I'd like to go." Well, that got translated, and he kind of looked at me with big eyes. And he said, "Oh, you can't go." And I said, "Well, why not?" And he said, "If you go, they'll kill you." Okay, I need to stay between the white lines here. So we gave him the money to go off into Brazil with enough money for gasoline for his boat. And he went, and it was, maybe 6 months later, I was here in the United States, and I got this message from our translator, and he he sent me some photographs, some pictures of this guy, this pastor, this Matses pastor in Brazil, in the river, baptizing some people. Now, these are the same people that he was concerned that would kill me, but he went over there, spread the gospel, and these people accepted Christ. And I can't, how do you say what a full heart you have when you've spent time working with people and you can't go any further, but they do. And it was just an amazing thing. It was a special thing to get a photograph of him baptizing some Brazilian tribesmen that really nobody else could reach.
I want to read a scripture that reminded me of something you said. Psalm 71:18 says, "So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come."
Oh, wow. Yeah, amen.
And I think about just kind of what's happened here. One, this is kind of a retirement phase for you and Marcy. And then two, to just think the goal all along is to see it kind of take on a local indigenous traction where they are the ones carrying the gospel further. And I think even in your time there, you've seen that happening, which is really, really cool. A lot of ministries struggle to think in terms of succession, right? You have one leader who stays through it their whole time. They retire or quit or die or whatever happens to them. And then everything kind of falls apart. You mentioned in your introduction that you used to be the executive director. In the last year or two, like how have you sort of planned for transferring to another younger leader?
Well, that very first trip that we made back in 2013, we met a young man, Kyle Peen is his name, and he was a high schooler, and he was there with that missionary that I said, the young man from Iquitos that was doing mission work. He was there kind of as, summertime mentorship or whatever you call that. And so we met him, and Marcy and I loved him, and then we kind of lost track of him a little bit, but then it wasn't too long, a few years later, we caught back up, and then he got married, and then he had kids and went to college and all kinds of things, but he was ready to do something, and he married a young lady that was the same way. And so they came out, they weren't sure where they were supposed to go or what they were supposed to do, but they knew God was leading them into the ministry, into mission work. And they came out, and, God just put it on their hearts. This is where you need to be. They're out there right now, living in the jungle and doing, carrying on. And I'm thrilled to death with it. I mean, I have no Kakama Project and the ministry and all that did not belong to me. It belonged to God. I was thrilled to be able to have some young people that were, wanting to pick it up, run with it. It just means that, it'll continue to go on. And there's so many that still need to be reached out there.
So if you were thinking of somebody, let's say in their mid-50s, right? They're looking at retirement in the next, 5-10 years, and they're just thinking through options, right? There's the option of, traveling by RV or vacationing or all the other things that people do in retirement. There's all the worries, the health, the money, all of this kind of stuff. Just sitting where you're sitting, what would be your advice to them?
Well, I would say that we were doing the same thing. We were nearing retirement age, and we would talk about visiting the Grand Canyon and whatever else, just what are we going to do? We retire, we're going to have a good time. And God was pretty clear with us, and we did have a good time, but we were doing it in the jungle with some tribal people. And we never, ever would have dreamed that was what was going to happen, but it did. And it was the greatest blessing of our lives, is to be able to live with these people and to let them know about a God that loves them. And I mean, it just, my little signature deal is always John 17:3, and I just write that others may know him. But if you look up John 17:3, it's Jesus praying and saying, and this is eternal life, that they might know you and the one true God and Jesus Christ whom you've sent. And so, you see people that come to know God in a personal way like that. I mean, there is no better blessing and no better joy than seeing that. As far as the hardships go, we hardly ever thought about it. We were so involved with what we were doing that, it's hot in the jungle, and it's there's mosquitoes and all kinds of things. Marcy had a pet tarantula that would climb up outside on our window every
Nope.
day.
That's a big bucket of nope right there.
Well, it's got the name Charlotte. It was our pet.
Charlotte was a friendly spider, not a killer.
There's all kind of things that go on out there.
All right. Well, Sam, thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I really appreciate it.
And listen, just, if there was anything I would say about all this is the greatest joy in life is just to serve and to be submissive. And that's what it really amounts to. And there's been so many times when I have not been that way. And I can tell you from experience that when I submitted and just threw caution to the wind and said, whatever you want, God, let's go do it. It's been the happiest days of my life doing this. There's battles. It's tough. I mean, you're living in a jungle, so there's not anything easy about that as far as just living conditions and everything. But still, when you see somebody over in Brazil giving their life to Christ, and you think, my goodness, is that not super wonderful or what?
Yeah.
Let me just at least close with this. We had a meeting this past Sunday evening, and a group meeting, and we, prayed and everything. And One of the things, though, that somebody asked, they're always asking me about stuff like that. And I said, I want to go back. I said, I know I can't go and live like we have been. Tomorrow, today is as you record this, can I give a date? I mean, it's the 26th of February. Tomorrow's my birthday. I'll be 74. And I know I can't go back there and live. But what I told them was, if you can get a few guys together, there are places that I've not been able to go while I was there, but I do want to go. And if I can get a little team together, we're going to go.
Well, let me know.
Brian, I think you and I talked about this one time, and then COVID hit and it messed us up.
I still owe you a trip. I think that's right.
Well, I'm serious about it, though. There's the Mosses are one of them that I'd like to go back to their village. And
I'm in. Let's do it.
Yeah. All right. I'll let you know if I can just get a few people together. We'll do it.
All right. Bye, Sam.
All right. Take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Sam has got stories by the hour, so it was really hard to kind of be selective with questions and trimming things down. I kind of want to close out our series with a couple of questions for us to consider about the end. And the first of these questions is, should I become a missionary or stay home? Right? This is kind of maybe this is a question that's been building for you as we've been going through the series, is just this notion of, okay, maybe there is a different way to think about retirement, not retirement, but sustainment. And what does that mean for me, right? Does it mean, and then my example is, Sam, the missionary in retirement, and his wife, Marcy. And so maybe this question comes to mind, like, well, should I do this or should I stay home? And I think when we ask these questions, we kind of get to the root of some of the issues. We often think of serving God and living our life as two different things, right? I'll either serve God or I'll do what I want to do. And those are counter-exclusive ideas. And I think sometimes we think of things in these two different brackets because we've grown up in a secular world. But when we use the term secular, we mean something that doesn't have God in it, something that is religiously neutral, right? When we talk about secular government or secular education, we mean not from a religious standpoint. But sometimes we secularize our own faith, right? I have my Monday through Friday in one bin, and then over here I have my Sunday. I have my work here, my family here, my faith is over there. All these different areas of my life just fit into their own distinct silos, and there's no cross communication. And so we could rephrase the question a little bit more pointedly. Is the choice between buying an RV and touring all of the national parks or serving God? And I think this is kind of a false dichotomy. I would argue that no, it's not between those two choices at all. In week one, I mentioned that part of the premise of this whole series is rejecting the sacred secular divide, that this is a false divide that we should reject because the earth is the Lord. Psalm 24:1 says this. God is Lord over everything, every area. I bring all of this up because I wanted to close on this idea of mission sending, but I don't want you to think, well, the only way to be faithful to this call is to do what Sam and Marcy did. I love what they did, and honestly, I think it's worthy of consideration of, is this the time in my life when I can actually do something like that? And maybe that is something you should consider. However, that's not the only way to live out this kind of idea that God has us in some kind of, serving him in some kind of mission capacity. The only way to do this is not to go overseas. Sam went to the jungle because this is where God called him. The gospel goes where the people go, right? God called him down there and that's where he went. But if you think in our culture, where do our people go when they retire? They buy an RV and they go see the national parks. Right? So people who've avoided God their whole life, they've just focused on work and early retirement and saving and investing, and now they get that kind of party time in their life, the good time in their life. They go and they travel. And so one way of looking at the question of do I buy an RV or do I serve God is the question of saying, well, where are the people going? Where are you going to serve God? Right? Someone needs to reach those people. This is a similar concept to what I talked about in the Gospel at Work series. It's the same logic of, well, people are finding their place of meaning and being in the office space. They're no longer finding this as much in social clubs and based on their neighborhood and all of those kinds of things. They're largely looking to their job for this. And so as a church or as Christians in general, if we start an outside, hey, let's go on Friday and do this thing over here, well, we're missing where the people are at. They're already there. They're already gathered. They're already finding meaning and networking. And the same can be true for a classic retirement. People are finding what they're going to do. And so we don't have to make that kind of thing the enemy of mission. It's not. The two can go hand in hand. It's not about where you go. It's about your purpose, wherever you go. Just look at Matthew 28 with me. This is the Great Commission. I have to be careful because we're going to be in the Great Commission in a few weeks going through Matthew, so I have to leave myself some room there. But Matthew 28:19 says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all I've commanded you, and behold, I am with you always to the end of the age." In English, this "go therefore," it looks like a command, but it's not actually a command. It should be translated as you go, or maybe going. As you go, make disciples, or in going, make disciples. The assumption is that they would be going places. So the commission is not to go, but it's to carry the gospel wherever you go. It's to make disciples wherever you go. If we were to survey the book of Acts and just see how do people move around, how are they going? How are they living this out? We would see a lot of different things. We would see where most of the Jerusalem church left Jerusalem because of persecution. We would see where Priscilla and Aquila, who started in Rome at the other end, left Rome because of ethnic persecution, because of Rome's anti-Semitic policies. We see where Paul goes to Macedonia because he had a vision. Hey, come over here. And then he and his team went over there. We see how Peter went to Cornelius in Acts chapter 10 because of a similar kind of vision. Both of these men went to prison out of duress. They were arrested. They went to synagogues out of habit. They went all of these different places. There's definitely a going component or an as-you-go component. And sometimes these are forced events. Sometimes they were events against their will. Other times it was their habit or a spiritual vision that they had to go and to do something. But as they went, they spread the gospel everywhere they went. When Paul is locked in prison, he's singing hymns and he's evangelizing the jailer there. And so all of these different scenarios, it didn't matter whether the reason for going was voluntary or involuntary, whether it was a good thing or a bad thing, the gospel went wherever they went. The next question to look at is, should I enjoy life or serve God? Again, this is kind of a false dichotomy. It's not about where you go, it's about what you do. The fact that these questions are false dichotomies is part of what I'm trying to point out. I'm trying to get us to this understanding of these things are not in exclusion. A lot of times when we think, I'm going to go serve God, we talk about it in such a way where it's like, well, we're giving up on our whole life. But we never think, well, maybe God has made my whole life to put my life in line with other people's lives so that when I'm focused on reaching people and serving God and being a faithful witness, our lives are aligned and the mission field then is immediately evident as to the people he's brought around me. Matthew 28:19 has that phrase, make disciples. That's the command. The command is not to go. It's assumed you're going. But as you go, do what? Make disciples. Then he says 2 ways of how, baptizing them and teaching them. Baptizing them, teaching them to obey. Last week I read Psalm 71, and that resonated with a lot of folks in the room. I want to read a couple of those verses again in recap. Psalm 71:17 says, "O God, from my youth you have taught me, and I still proclaim your wondrous deeds. So even to old age and gray hairs, O God, do not forsake me until I proclaim your might to another generation, your power to all those to come. Your righteousness, O God, reaches the high heavens. You who have done great things, O God, who is like you? You have made me see many troubles and calamities and will revive me again. From the depths of the earth, you will bring me up again." The gospel is for another generation, is what this passage is making the point here. Maybe this verse has inspired you. Maybe it's something you aspire to do. You hear this verse and you get excited. You go, yes, this is what I want to do. I want to make sure that as I am changing my own generation, as I'm getting older, that I am pouring into those who are younger. Maybe this verse terrified you. Maybe you haven't done something like this yet and it feels like a daunting task. And so you think, well, where on earth do I start? How much time will this take? Do I just start trying to disciple everyone who's younger than me? How do I make this work? And the scriptures actually give us a bit of advice here. 2 Timothy 2:2 says, Paul is speaking to one of the young men that he's been training. He says, what you've heard from me in the presence of many witnesses, entrust to faithful men who will be able to teach others also. There's a couple of things to note in this verse. The first thing is that, kind of like Psalm 71, there's a generational component. There's 4 generations here, even though this is happening presumably in one lifetime. There's 4 generations spiritually speaking. There's Paul to Timothy, there's Timothy to faithful men, and then there's others also. That's 4 generations. The second thing is that we're not called to disciple every single person. When you hear church plants, you hear missionaries, they go, we want everyone to hear, every man, woman, and child. There's statements like that. Nothing wrong with these goals and aspirations, but realistically, we're not going to disciple everyone. We're told to start with those who are able to hear, who are able to respond, who are able to teach also. We're told to pick faithful people. It sounds like a great idea to reach everyone, but that's not what we actually see when we read the Bible closely. Jesus chooses 12 men. Yes, he speaks to large crowds. Yes, he goes throughout countrysides. But the majority of his time was spent with those 12 men. And then by extension, the 70. There were these kind of concentric circles. Even within the 12, there was the 3 that he spent even more focused time with. We could look at Paul. Paul also, like Jesus, spoke to the masses and traveled around. He wrote letters. But a lot of his time was spent on small teams mentoring people. Each of these examples shows us that it's not a question of how many or trying to reach everyone or getting frantic. Sometimes it's focusing on the 3 or the 12 or the few people that God has put in our life. As you go, make disciples and teach them to obey. But there's this idea that there's kind of a choosiness, there's kind of a selective process here. Not everyone is open. Not everyone is ready to continue the task. Jesus gives us the parable of the soils to help us set our expectations. Jesus tells us about the broad gate and the narrow gate. So the scriptures are clear. We don't need the assumption that we're going to go out and everyone is just going to believe. We don't need to get frantic about that or feel stressed about that. The scriptures actually tell us that there's a purpose in focusing on the small and on the few. If I were to give a kind of summary conclusion, it would be something like this. We have a lot of fears when we think about retirement. There's nothing happening in our world today, right now, to make us think that anything is going to be better or more secure or more financially stable or a better prosperous future, if you look at the news right now. There's a dozen or so open conflicts on the globe. In our own state, the price of fuel has skyrocketed, and they've just passed a new tax that's probably just going to continue on its path. It's easy to lean into the fear and the uncertainty and to look out for ourselves, to focus our time on, well, I need to make sure I'm okay. I need to plan for my future. But we're not called to sit outside of darkness and identify it and analyze it and point it out, right? The call of the gospel is to go into a dark world. Jesus is the light that goes into the darkness and expels the darkness. And then when we follow him, this is what we are doing. We're called to go into darkness and proclaim God's kingdom. Our faith journey has to extend to all areas of our life, to our youth, to our early single or married days, to our work life. And as we're thinking now about the end, we have to be thinking, we have to be planning on how are we going to sustain our faith walk? How are we going to sustain the faith journey that God has us on all the way to the end? I want to go back to something that Sam said, a word that he used, when I asked him what advice he would give to people who were yet to retire. What would he say when they were thinking about the fears of the future? And honestly, Sam's a very hey, we can do it kind of guy. He's an engineer, right? So there's always some fix, and you hang out with him, he'll show you all these little projects and things that he's done. So there's always a kind of a workaround that he's got in his mind to physical problems. And I kind of expected something like that. Of, just don't worry. Trust God, it'll all work out. That's not what he said, though. He said, submit. Submit, that's a tough word for us. Submit to what God says and obey him. As you've been thinking through and processing through the various topics that we've gone through in the series, that's kind of the question I want to leave you with. The word I want to leave you with is, will you submit? Are you submitting to what God is leading you to do? Our obedience is worth it. At the end of the Great Commission, verse 20 says, behold, I'm with you always to the end of the age. Psalm 71:20 says, you who have made me see many troubles and calamities, will revive me again. From the depths of the earth, you will bring me up again. This is a promise not just of his presence, it is a promise of his presence, of restoration, but also if you're looking for an Old Testament reference for resurrection, it's right there. We can follow God with a bold faith because we don't have to worry about what is going to happen because we already know what is going to happen. We know that he's going to be with us all the way to the end, and we know that he's going to raise us up again in him. What can touch us? If those two things are true, what do we really have to be afraid of? We simply have to submit and obey. So what does this mean for us? Number one, in a couple of Sundays, I'm going to do another Epilogue Sunday. So not this Sunday, but next. This coming Sunday will be Missions Conference Sunday. But the following Sunday, I'm going to do an Epilogue Sunday. For those who are maybe newer here and haven't gone through one of those, you say, well, what is that? It is a service without a planned agenda other than to allow space for people to share testimony. That might terrify you. Don't be afraid. I typically put 2 chairs right here, 2 microphones, and anyone who wants to come and share what you've been learning or what you've been struggling through with where you've been in God's Word in the series, that's your time to come up and share and talk, and sometimes maybe it goes any number of directions. It's a fun Sunday from a musical standpoint because Steve and the worship team don't have their usual, hey, we're going to play these exact songs. They're kind of listening to what we'll be talking about. And so I want to invite you to be thinking about that. In 2 weeks, is there something that God's been impressing on you? One of the things I saw in the retirement survey was that we have a group of people in our church who don't have any worries, who seem to have planned really well for retirement. And then we have a whole other group of people in our church who go, probably working till Jesus gets back, don't know how I'm going to retire. Like, it's those kind of things. And so honestly, if you've done a good job, or if you have some project, kind of like Sam has, if you're working on something in your retirement days, don't be bashful. Come up and share with us. So Epilogue Sundays, 2 Sundays from now, it's just kind of a wrap-up testimony Sunday, and so you can share. But the other thing is, I want to do a commissioning that day. And I did this during the Gospel at Work series. I basically put a challenge out there to it. I have a slide of that challenge. The other slide. There we go. So I kind of called it the every square inch challenge. This was coming from the phrase that Abraham Kuyper said, there's not a square inch of the universe that God doesn't look down with jealousy and say, it's mine. And so this is the idea, the earth is the Lord's, he wants it all back. So there were 4 kind of commitments that I called you to make. Number 1, I understand that God has placed me in my work to help establish his rule and reign. I'm committed to reflecting God's nature and bringing his blessing to those around me. I'm committed to knowing and living out God's true purpose for my whole life. I'm committed to lovingly and boldly being identified with Jesus in my work. So that was the challenge that I gave to you. And then we did a commissioning, right? I don't think of missionaries like Sam being true missionaries and then people like you being missionaries. I think if you are living out God's kingdom purpose in your life, that is what he wants. If he calls you overseas, great. If he calls you to the jungle, great. If he calls you to stay, great. If your mission field is your work, great. If it's, God's given you an opportunity in a third place, like an RV park or, hiking, biking, whatever, great. I think all of these things work. So I want to do the same thing where I want to give you an opportunity to go, hey, this is impactful to me. This is meaningful to me. I'm committing to this process. And so I have another generation challenge, and it's coming out of that verse from Psalm 70. And it says, I understand that my time, health, and resources are blessings from God that I'm committed to using for his kingdom. Number 2, I'm committed to living and preparing now so I can serve God as long as I'm able. Number 3, I'm committed to knowing and living out God's true purpose for my whole life. That one's just a direct copy from the other one because it already had a whole life in there. Number 4, I'm committed to lovingly and boldly being identified with Jesus wherever I go. So the question is not where do you go and how and all of that. It's what is the purpose that you're living your life with. Now, there will be no pressure 2 Sundays from now to take this challenge, to be commissioned. What that looked like last time we did this was we had some of our elders kind of at each of the aisles. People would come up, we would anoint them, we would pray with them and commission them to go and live like this. But be thinking about this, be praying about this. If this is something you would like to do, great. 2 Sundays from now is when we'll be doing that, and I want to invite you to make that kind of commitment. I think this is what we need to think about our life, is that God has commissioned all of us, not just people who sign up with an organization or people who move to what we might think of as a mission field. He's commissioned all of us to be following him, to be obedient, to be faithful. And so I'm going to close this with a word of prayer, and the worship team is going to come out, and they're going to sing one more song for us that's kind of coming out of that Psalm 70 passage. And so we'll just listen as they lead us. Let me say a word of prayer. Lord, we thank you for the lessons that you have been impressing on us during this series. Just the idea that from, not just from cradle to the grave, but from the cradle until we are reunited with you one day, you have our whole life set. You know the path for us. You know your will. You have a plan. And so, God, as we struggle to discern, we struggle to be obedient, we struggle with our fears, I pray that you would make your presence known, that you would give us the faith, you give us the obedience, to use that word that Sam said, to submit to you, to obey you all of our days, Lord. We ask this in your name. Amen.